Hi there, my name is Andrea, and this is High Literature, where I introduce books and stories and comics to you, the viewer. In the last video, I was reading from a chapter from Victor Hugo's Les Miserables, and I feel like that in this video I should continue reading that thing, but I just don't feel like it, and I think it's more realistic to acknowledge that you can start and stop stories to start another story any and all the time. It's fine. So with that being said, we're moving on. We'll get back to it later at some point, I'm sure, when I feel like it. But currently I've been reading a lot of Daphne du Maurier, and it's a lot of fun. And there is, let's see here, so it's this copy that I found at the last bookstore in downtown Los Angeles, and just randomly saw it on the shelf, and the cover just immediately caught my eye. And then when I saw who the author was, I was like, okay, well, I gotta get this book. I've never read anything by Daphne du Maurier prior to reading this. My cousin Becky first introduced me to her because she's a huge fan of the book Rebecca, and she lent me that and my cousin Rachel. And as it happens, sometimes books that you're loaned, even though you have every intention of reading them, they don't get read. One day I'll read them, and I'm sure I will love them, but in the meantime, I've been going through her short stories, and they are a lot of fun. And there's one in particular that really grabbed me. It's called The Pool, and what I really loved about it was how it just perfectly describes what it feels like to be a kid playing outside, as far as it just feels like this magical world that you escape to that's completely separate from your everyday existence. And being Daphne du Maurier, it's also kind of spooky, which I wasn't, well, you expect it because it's her, but it was just funny to have that reading experience with this story, because it's, you know, with the whole like, oh, being a kid playing outside, there's just kind of this innocent tenderness to it. So when you add the spooky element to it, I don't know, it changes things. And I found the mix really neat. And so I'm going to read from this. Sorry, Victor Hugo, no offense. We'll get back to you later, I promise. But in the meantime, we're going to do Daphne du Maurier's The Pool. I think this came out, let's see here, 1959 is the copyright. As soon as he had disappeared, Deborah made for the trees fringing the lawn, and once in the shrouded wood, felt herself safe. She walked softly along the alleyway to the pool. The late sun sent shafts of light between the trees and onto the alleyway, and a myriad insects webbed their way in the beams, ascending and descending like angels on Jacob's ladder. But were they insects, wondered Deborah, or particles of dust, or even split fragments of light itself, beaten out and scattered by the sun? It was very quiet. The woods were made for secrecy. They did not recognize her as the garden did. They did not care that for a whole year she would be at school or at Hunstanton or in London. The woods would never miss her. They had their own dark, passionate life. Deborah came to the opening where the pool lay, with the 5 alleyways branching from it, and she stood a moment before advancing to the brink, because this was holy ground and required atonement. She crossed her hands on her breast and shut her eyes. Then she kicked off her shoes. Mother of all things wild, do with me what you will, she said aloud. The sound of her own voice gave her a slight shock. Then she went down on her knees and touched the ground 3 times with her forehead. The first part of her atonement was accomplished, but the pool demanded sacrifice, and Deborah had come prepared. There was a stub of pencil she had carried in her pocket throughout the school term, which she called her luck. It had teeth marks on it and a chewed piece of rubber at one end. This treasure must be given to the pool, just as other treasures had been given in the past. a miniature jug, a crested button, a china pig. Deborah felt for the stub of pencil and kissed it. She had carried and caressed it for so many lonely months, and now the moment of parting had come. The pool must not be denied. She flung out her right hand, her eyes still shut, and heard the faint plop as the stub of pencil struck the water. Then she opened her eyes and saw in mid-pool a ripple. The pencil had gone, but the ripple moved, gently shaking the water lilies. The movement symbolized acceptance. Deborah, still on her knees and crossing her hands once more, edged her way to the brink of the pool and then, crouching there beside it, looked down into the water. Her reflection wavered up at her. And it was not the face she knew, not even the looking glass face, which anyway was false, but a disturbed image, dark-skinned and ghostly. The crossed hands were like the petals of the water lilies themselves, and the color was not waxen white, but phantom green. The hair, too, was not the lithe clump she brushed every day and tied back with ribbon, but a canopy, a shroud. When the image smiled, it became more distorted still. Uncrossing her hands, Deborah leant forward, took a twig, and drew a circle 3 times on the smooth surface. The water shook in ever-widening ripples, and her reflection, broken into fragments, heaved and danced, a sort of monster, and the eyes were there no longer, nor the mouth. Presently, the water became still. Insects, long-legged flies, and beetles with spread wings hummed upon it. A dragonfly had all the magnificence of a lily leaf to himself. He hovered there, rejoicing. But when Deborah took her eyes off him for a moment, he was gone. At the far end of the pool, beyond the clustering lilies, green scum had formed, and beneath the scum were rooted tangled weeds. They were so thick and had lain in the pool so long that if a man walked into them from the bank, he would be held and choked. A fly, though, or beetle, could sit upon the surface, and to him the pale green scum would not be treacherous at all, but a resting place, a haven. And if someone threw a stone so that the ripples formed, eventually they came to the scum and rocked it, and the whole of the mossy surface moved in rhythm, a dancing floor for those who played upon it. There was a dead tree standing by the far end of the pool. He could have been a fir or pine or even larch, for time had stripped him of identity. He had no distinguishing mark upon his person, but with grotesque limbs straddled the sky. A cap of ivy crowned his raked head. Last winter, a dangling branch had broken loose, and this now lay in the pool half submerged, the green scum dripping from the withered twigs. The soggy branch made a vantage point for birds, and as Deborah watched, a nestling suddenly flew from the undergrowth enveloping the dead tree and perched for an instant on the mossy filigree. He was lost in terror. The parent bird cried warningly from some dark safety, and the nestling, pricking to the cry, took off from the branch that had offered him temporary salvation. He swerved across the pool, his flight mistimed, yet reached security. The chitter from the undergrowth told of his scolding. When he had gone, silence returned to the pool. It was, so Deborah thought, the time for prayer. The water lilies were folding upon themselves. The ripples ceased. And that dark hollow in the center of the pool, that black stillness where the water was deepest, was surely a funnel to the kingdom that lay below. Down that funnel had traveled the discarded treasures. The stub of pencil had lately plunged the depths. He had now been received as an equal among his fellows. This was the single law of the pool, for there were no other commandments. Once it was over, that first cold, headlong flight, Deborah knew that the softness of the welcoming water took away all fear. It lapped the face and cleansed the eyes, and the plunge was not into darkness at all, but into light. It did not become blacker as the pool was penetrated, but paler, more golden green, and the mud that people told themselves was there was only a defense against strangers. Those who belonged, who knew, went to the source at once, and there were caverns and fountains and rainbow-colored seas. There were shores of the whitest sand. There was soundless music. Once again, Deborah closed her eyes and bent lower to the pool. Her lips nearly touched the water. This was the great silence, when she had no thoughts and was accepted by the pool. Waves of quiet ringed themselves around her, and slowly she lost all feeling and had no knowledge of her legs or of her kneeling body or of her cold clasped hands. There was nothing but the intensity of peace. It was a deeper acceptance than listening to the earth, because the earth was of the world. The earth was a throbbing pulse, but the acceptance of the pool meant another kind of hearing, a closing in of the waters, and just as the lilies folded, so did the soul submerge. I just love that. And then her brother shows up and interrupts everything. Deborah? Deborah? Oh no, not now. Don't let them call me back now. It was as though someone had hit her on the back or jumped out at her from behind a corner. The sharp and sudden clamor of another life destroying the silence, the secrecy. And then came the tinkle of the cowbells. It was the signal from their grandmother that the time had come to go in. Not imperious and ugly with authority like the clanging bell at school, summoning those at play to lessons or chapel, but a reminder, nevertheless, that time was all important, that life was ruled to order, that even here, in the holiday home the children loved, the adult reigned supreme. All right, muttered Deborah, standing up and thrusting her numbed feet into her shoes. This time the rather raised tone of Deborah and the more hurried clanging of the cowbells, brought long ago from Switzerland, suggested a more imperious grandmamma than the tolerant one who seldom questioned. It must mean their supper was already laid, soup perhaps getting cold, and the farce of washing hands, of tidying, of combing hair must first be gone through. Come on, Deb, and now the shout was close, was right at hand, privacy lost forever, for her brother came running down the alleyway, swishing his bamboo stick in the air. What have you been doing? The question was an intrusion and a threat. She would never have asked him what he had been doing had he wandered away wanting to be alone. But Roger, alas, did not claim privacy. He liked companionship, and his question now, asked half in irritation, half in resentment, came really from the fear that he might lose her. Nothing, said Deborah. Roger eyed her suspiciously. She was in that mourning mood, and it meant when they went to bed that she would not talk. One of the best things in the holidays was having the two adjoining rooms and calling through to Deb, making her talk. Come on, he said, they've rung. And the making of their grandmother into they, turning a loved individual into something impersonal, showed Deborah that even if he did not understand, he was on her side. He had been called from play just as she had. I just think that's so funny. The subtle little things siblings do to acknowledge, I feel you. Cracks me up. This story goes on for quite a while. Nice little chunk of pages. Page 137 to 150. But we're going to have to stop here. So, yeah, I love that story, and I promise I'll finish it. It's a lot less daunting than the chapter in Les Miserables, and I won't cry. So anyway, I hope that you got to enjoy a little taste of Daphne du Maurier and liked it as much as I do. And I look forward to chatting with you guys again. All right, thanks. Bye.